Hey there friends, and welcome to LaughNapkin. My name is Frank, and today we're going to be looking at the subreddit r/Prorevenge. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. This revenge story happened in the 90s when I was working after school as a line cook / chef assistant at a Chinese restaurant. The place specialized in noodle soups, with the main attraction being our soup stock. The owner used a much revered passed down family recipe. It consisted of freshly cracked pork bones, fresh spices, and fresh vegetables, all kept at a rolling boil for over 12 hours. It had to be started the night before, and the owner was very particular about the soup stock. If it ran out, then it ran out. He refused to cheat as some other places do by adding water or powdered stock, etc. The owner himself was this really awesome old Chinese gentleman. He had some incredible stories. For example, he enlisted into the Kuomintang Chinese Republic Army in the 40s and worked as a chef for the KMT officers during World War II. He told us about how one time his division's headquarters was overrun and he had to escape on a push bike ahead of the advancing Chinese army. Eventually, when the Chinese Communist Party took over in the 50s, he was assigned to a steel factory to work for the rest of his life. He got the hell out and eventually made his way to the US as an asylum seeker. I digress, but my point is that he was an awesome guy and was a genuinely kind and considerate boss. He always made sure his employees were fed before the evening shift and let me study during quiet nights. His son, on the other hand, was a real piece of work. This guy dropped out of college. His parents saved up for him to study medicine after 2 years. He floated in and out of jobs, but mostly stayed unemployed, living with his parents and using their money well into his mid-30s. He eventually started working at the restaurant, nominally as the front-of-house manager, but in reality did nothing but watch TV and take naps. While I was only a line cook, the old man and I got along really well. He trusted me and would routinely let me make the soup stock the night before under his supervision. Sadly, the old man died after my 5th year working there. That's when the son took over. The mother had passed years ago. The son had zero cooking experience, but decided to take over as the chef. He didn't like the idea of putting the soup on overnight because it was a waste of gas, and instead got me to do the prep work the night before, and then would just switch the pot on himself in the morning. He would also routinely add plain water to the soup when it got low, so he could continue selling noodle soups. The most incredible thing, however, was disgustingly how he got the waitstaff to throw customers' unfinished soups back into the stock pot for reuse. When I confronted him about it, he told me that it was no problem, as the heat killed any germs, and threatened to fire me if I said anything. Not surprisingly, customers started leaving as the food quality degraded. This caused the son to panic and cut even more costs. He fired most of the old staff and thus overworked the remaining. He couldn't fire me because I was the only one left who knew how to do the soup. He also stopped using quality ingredients and started to buy cheap pre-packaged stuff in order to reduce my prep work hours. After a few months of this, I got sick of his crap. I was about to start college myself and told him that I was giving him my notice. He of course took this poorly and told me that I was a loser. He told me not to bother coming in tomorrow, but I was to spend the remainder of my shift showing a recent hire on how to do my job, stating that he would not issue my last check if I didn't complete a thorough handover. I laughed in his face and walked out on the spot. I didn't bother chasing up my last check. As a parting gift, I sent an email to our local food safety board informing them of the poor sanitary practice of reusing leftover soups. I helpfully also enclosed a few photos that I had sneakily taken of the practice. The board sent inspectors the very next day and closed the restaurant. There were other issues such as unhygienic bathrooms and unclean eating utensils. He was issued a massive fine and a list of undertakings to carry out before it could be reopened. The restaurant remained closed and eventually sold off. I didn't bother chasing up what happened to the son, but I hope he has learned his lesson and done something productive with his life. So check this out, guys. OP has actually listed the recipe to this amazing soup stock, I'll definitely be checking out this recipe. Hit that like button for delicious soup. On to the next story. Friday night here in the country can get a little crazy sometimes, so I don't mind when my neighbors cause a ruckus or party loud as long as it's not too crazy. Tonight, I'm on call for Virginia State Police towing rotation, which means that I've got about 25 minutes to get to wherever the wreck, DUI, impound, etc. is. As luck would have it, my neighbors are having a party, and guess what's blocking my driveway? That's right, about 25 to 30 cars. I live down a dirt road at the end of a cul-de-sac, and it's pretty narrow. One in, one out type of deal. And with this rain we've been having, parking in the grass, clay, mud is really not the best idea. Even with a 4x4, it can still get tricky. I noticed a few cars coming in early this evening, and walked over to my neighbors and made it pretty clear that I was on call, and as long as they didn't block the road or my driveway, all would be good. No problems here. Well, I get a call from my boss asking if I can go warm up the rotator and the light duty flatbed, tow trucks. It's about 12:30 a.m., so I get my boots on and other gear because if I'm up, I might as well stay at the shop and clean a few things to stay busy and make the night move along. I get in my car, and as I'm backing out of the driveway, I notice I'm blocked in. I don't mean by one truck, but by nearly 15 different vehicles. I calmly walk over to my neighbors, about a quarter-mile hike, and as I'm looking for them through the crowd of drunk teenagers, some idiot wants to know why I'm on his property. He's not the property owner. I've never seen this classy gentleman. Finally, I find my neighbor and ask her if she can move the cars. I've got to go to work, and she says in a normal tone, doesn't yell over the music, into the house, "Whoever's blocking the driveway next door, move your trucks," then slams the door in my face. I knock again, and she answers with a drunken, "Oh God, this ish again." Internally, I'm thinking, alright then. I do my best to explain I'm on call and I need to get out of my driveway to go to work. She comes back sloshing a natty light, exclaiming, "It's a party, relax." Shuts the door in my face and yells, "Screw that woman." I smile, and as I'm walking away, Macho Man throws a beer at me and cackles, "Yeah, you best leave. Go on, get." I get on my phone with dispatch and call for as many trucks as we have available tonight, about 10, and tell them to come over. Mama's got some PPIs, private property impounds. I call up police dispatch and ask if they'd send out an officer in case things get out of hand. And as soon as he gets to my place, my rigs start rolling up and hooking vehicles up and taking them to the impound yard. We get down to the last 3 vehicles, a yellow Civic, gold Silverado, and an old F-150. The Civic owner bolts to his car and takes off. The Silverado girl, pretty wasted, gets stuck and starts tearing up my property. Officer walks over and she throws a fit. Long story short, she gets arrested for underage drinking and a DUI. The Ford owner doesn't show up. I get to work after all the impounds, and with me, I brought coffees and snacks for my drivers. Tomorrow's not a business day, which means if these tools want their cars back, it's going to be the regular $289.50 plus 2 days of storage at $55 a day and a $100 gate fee. I make a note in every single storage sheet, papers that the vehicle owners get, to thank the girl who had the party for getting towed. Several of the kids' parents called wanting to know where their cars or trucks were. I gave them the yard address and told them that they can come anytime. As soon as they started shouting about illegal tows and threatening with lawyers, I showed them pictures of their cars with no parking signs. I explained that I tried to reason with the owner of the property, me, but she was tired of being blocked in by drunken teenagers. There are signs on my road that say no parking and do not block the driveway. Don't piss off a tow truck driver. She'll legally take your vehicles. Thank God I don't have neighbors like this. OP absolutely wrecked them fools though. What would you do if your neighbors did this to you? Let me know in the comment section below. On to the next story. My dad is a pretty easygoing guy, usually pretty calm, but like everyone else, he has the potential to blow up at someone if they kept at him enough. This was in the early 90s. I was playing in the front yard, and a couple came up and asked if my parents were at home. I nodded, pointed towards the bottom door, and they knocked. These guys were Jehovah's Witnesses, and it was my first exposure to evangelizing. I gotta put it out there that neither my father nor I have issues with the witnesses. We aren't really a religious family at all, but to each their own. When my dad came to the door, he was still in work clothes from yard work, maybe a little tired. He told the guys he wasn't interested. It wasn't a super courteous reaction, but it wasn't rude either. It just seemed like something he didn't feel like dealing with. Fast forward an hour later, 2 other young men show up at the house. The dad was in his robe at this point. The robe was like his effing uniform for not doing anything. Once the yard work was done, it was time to watch golf and relax. He went down into his cave, and that was it. Now there was a knock on the door, and my dad, Mom was out of the house, had to deal with it. He was very matter-of-fact with the people. It sounded like a lecture at this point. Listen guys, you gotta coordinate a little bit more. You've already been here once today. Do you know you're going over the same area that someone else did? This is my Saturday. I'm just trying to relax. They apologized quickly and left, skipping our neighbors in the process. Let's head 3 more hours into the future. There was a 3rd knock on the door. I could hear my dad coming up from the basement. Son of an ish. He opened the door and 2 young men started in with their pitch. Do you have time for us to share the good news with you? My father replied, absolutely. Come downstairs. To paint a picture of my dad's basement, he had his home office on the left. On the right was a den area with a lazy boy or the sofa for the extra lazy. It was about 4 in the afternoon now. He pointed to the sofa and turned the lazy boy around to face them, like some sort of middle-class Godfather type. He reached into his robe as they sat down across from him, eager to tell him all about their mission. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered it to the men. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't smoke. As a people? Correct. Well, let's call that strike 1. My dad started chain-smoking Camels until the whole basement was hazy. Please, continue. This made them uncomfortable, but they continued. After another 10 minutes, my father excused himself, came back with a bottle of cheap scotch and 3 glasses. Apparently witnesses can drink alcohol, but these guys weren't having any. They politely refused, but they were getting nervous. Meanwhile, my dad started slamming scotch like it was bottled water, and the witnesses kept on with the witnessing. At this point, my dad was no longer acting drunk, he was drunk. You guys want to see something pretty neat? My dad walked over to the padlocked closet by his office. He unlocked it and started removing guns and stacking them on his desk. How in the hell do you lose a live grenade? Oh, I think I see it. Thank you for your time, sir. They got up and showed themselves out the door. My dad had a chuckle about it and then passed out on the couch. I got the majority of the story at dinner, while my dad was explaining to my mom why he was flushed so early in the evening. I would get other bits of the story as I got older. My parents lived at that house another 15 years before moving, and they never had another Jehovah's Witness show up again in all that time. Well, that's one way to get rid of them. Probably not pro-revenge, but it's a fair story. Gotta love the good old Jehovah's. Alright guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed these stories, and I will see you tomorrow.